Hi, my name is Cesar Robinson, and today I will be presenting the paper called Scambaiter, Understanding Targeting Nigerian Scams on Craigslist. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the original authors of this paper. They are Young Sam Park out of the University of Maryland College Park, Jackie Jones, George Mason University, Damon McCoy, George Mason University, Elaine Shee, University of Maryland College Park, and Marcus Jacobson at Zapfraud. This paper was initially presented at the Network and Distributed System Security Symposium, NDSS, in the year 2014. There's also a link to the paper for references. The purpose and objective of the researchers was mainly to better understand the underground economy of Nigerian scams and to seek effective intervention points. For a little bit of background, the advanced fee fraud scams, also known as Nigerian scams or 419 scams, have become more sophisticated. Even though these scams are observed frequently, the community's understanding of this operation is limited, mostly due in part to scammers actually operating underground. So not much is known about them. Some of these scams have evolved from simple untargeted email messages to more sophisticated scams targeted at users of classifieds, dating, or other websites. They are a very prevalent form of online fraud that not only causes financial loss to individuals and businesses alike, but also can bring emotional or psychological damage to victim users. The likelihood is very high that either you, me, or somebody that you or I know have been targeted and victims of some of these scams. In the year 2005, estimated global losses to this type of scams was set at $3 billion. And with most recent calculations still showing around 2 billion losses per year on this type of scams. Many sites like Craigslist, they filter out scam postings to protect legitimate users. They do so by blocking specific IPs, using phone number verification, or removing ads with suspicious content. However, little is done to protect users from receiving spam replies to their ads. Specifically, email service providers face a more challenging task when attempting to filter lower volume and target advanced free fall rather than less targeted and more common spam. The researchers or the authors chose to implement this by creating an automated data collection system that is meant to attract and correspond with potential scammers. Some of the key elements of these systems are um, magnetic honeypot ads that are meant to repel legitimate users. You can receive and respond to inquiries about the ads. You can gather emails, consolidate patterns, and find geolocation distribution. And you can also cluster the observed scammers into groups based on key factors like email, shipping address, phone number, email payload, among others. As you can see here on the right, this is sort of the architecture of this system. We have proxy servers, scammers, Craigslist as of middleware or middle service, email service provider for communication, and the automated data collection system on the left. The system will post a magnetic honeypot ad which will attract the scammers only in step one. In step two, their scammers will send emails in response to the magnetic honeypot ads. And then step three and four, the system will automatically engage in email conversation with the scammers. This will go on until a fraud attempt has been received, which moving forward we will define a fraud attempt as a conversation that eventually leads to a fraud attempt, where the scammer sends a fake PayPal notification or a fake check and urges the victim to send the goods to the scammer indicated mailing address. The team of researchers used different data collection methodologies. As mentioned earlier, The team relied on honeypot ads. These ads were used to sell different goods in different categories, such as auto parts, computers, jewelry, and cell phones, to selectively attract scammers. These ads are simply unattractive ads. For example, the team would try to sell a used iPad at a price higher than new, or items that are very popular on Amazon. To make sure the item can easily be purchased somewhere else, will be posted at a higher price. Any sensible real user will conceivably not reply to such posts. Not the scammers, though. They will certainly reply in an attempt to scamming you out of shipping the asset to them. The system also used an automated communication engine. This system performed linguistic analysis and engaged in multiple rounds of communication with the scammers. It used various filters to classify emails as valid scam emails. It also responded to a subset of received emails, specifically emails with a subject line matching the subject of the post. The system will also exchange multiple rounds of emails until it led to a fraud attempt. As defined earlier, a fraud attempt is simply when the team receives a fake PayPal notification or a fake check, followed by a request for the victim to send the product to the scammer's mailing address. Based on the data, PayPal proved to be the most common mode of operation. IP addresses cannot always be retrieved from email headers. So the team and the authors, they define a simple solution to this. They embedded a product image with a link to a researcher-owned web server. Once a scammer clicked on the image, the researchers would have been able to retrieve the IP address from the payload within the logs of their web server. This information will be used to analyze and reverse engineer the location of the attackers. Since the research was dealing with human subjects, the team had to solve a couple ethical issues. Even though the honeypot advertisements were designed to be unattractive, such that legitimate users would not be interested in replying, it was still possible that the experiment would have received responses from legitimate users that sent an actual payment to buy a product that the team had posted on Craigslist. In order to prevent this unintentional victimization, the author consistently checked if there were any actual payments made by legitimate Craigslist users. If a payment was made by a legitimate user, the victim would be provided with pertinent information about the experiment, and the item would be shipped to them, or the refund procedure would be initiated immediately. In addition, any message from this user will be purged from the collected data and not used for any particular parts of this research. Note that fortunately, the team at the time found no payment made by any legitimate user during the entire experiment. Now on to some experimental results. This experiment ran for 3 months during the summer of 2013. Ads were posted in 20 different locations within Craigslist, 10 large and 10 small cities or areas. The large cities include San Francisco, Seattle, New York, Boston, LA, San Diego, Portland, Washington, D.C., Chicago, and Denver, while the small cities or areas include Twin Tiers, Cumberland Valley, Midville, Susanville, Siskiyou, Hanford Corcoran, Santa Maria, Winchester, Southwest, and Eastern Colorado. The price range of the items being sold ranged from $80, the lowest price item, to $7,000 being the highest price item. As you can see, there is a decent spread between price of these items. In total, the authors posted 1,276 ads, while only 629 of those were effective. In this context, effective means ads that were active for more than a week on Craigslist, or those that were not flagged as being suspicious of spam activity. The team of researchers utilized 42 distinct email accounts to run this experiment. 15,270 emails were received in response to the post created by the authors. Out of that number, 13,125 were considered scam activity. This accounted for a total of 9.6% scam trials per ad. 8,048 responses were sent to initial emails. Initial email being a response from a scammer to a post. Out of a total of 9,902 total emails sent by the researchers. In aggregate, the team received 751 fake PayPal payment notifications, as well as 885 bogus check fraud attempts. Additional results show that many of the initial messages were automated and arrived from many email addresses that were quickly abandoned. Similarly, most of the initial messages contained a different reply to address that pointed to a smaller set of longer-lived email addresses that would be reused throughout the scams. The team was also able to deduce that they were likely accomplices or reshipping operations being used throughout this operation. Occurrences of the words such as God, overseas military personnel, and capital letters could have been used to help filter these messages. Here we have an example of some of the frequently observed emails during the research. As you can see, the top body was observed 295 times. The second most common body of the email was observed 293 times, while the third and fourth were observed 182 and 180 times respectively. Here we have a map plotting the IP locations geographically. As you can see, the majority are in Nigeria and the United States. The team received a total of 7,759 access to their image server, which comes out to be 8 times per IP on average. Total unique addresses were 965, spread across 22 countries. The researchers used host.ip.info to successfully reverse engineer the location of these IP sources. As mentioned previously and briefly, majority were in Nigeria at 50.3%. Second place was the United States at 37.6%, while the rest of the IPs were mostly distributed between Europe and West Africa. It is very likely that some of the scammers use proxies, so this IP geolocation map may not reflect their true location 100%. The team of authors also utilized a service called Project Honeypot. This service basically tracks reported scam IP addresses. Out of all the IPs the team encountered in their research, 40.4% of these IPs were blacklisted already by Project Honeypot. However, 43% of them had not been blacklisted or graylisted. So this study helped provide data to supplement existing IP blacklists in the Honeypot project. Additional experimental results show that Gmail is the preferred email server. This, even though Gmail is the most expensive in the marketplace. There was a cluster of bad email addresses, as you can see on the right, that only differ by a single digit. This helped the researchers kind of cluster this into a specific group of scammers. There were a total of 153 distinct shipping addresses. 70% were in Nigeria, 23% in the USA, 7% in other foreign countries. This continues to reassure the notion that there were accomplices across the globe and reshipping operations were taking place to make sure that the shipped items arrive in Nigeria. Back to the first bullet point about Gmail being the preferred email server, the researchers were able to deduced that this was due to the fact that Gmail hides the sender IP, allowing the scammers to remain anonymous. However, as mentioned previously, the researchers were able to find a way, and a successful way at that, of showing the scammer's IP address. Researchers also found that for the most part, scammers or group of them will create several email accounts to send out massive amount of scam emails. After analyzing the data, some patterns started to come up. First one of them being that scammer responses peaked at 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. and from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. UTC. This corresponds to the time period between 12 p.m. to 7 p.m. West Africa time, which largely overlaps with working time in Nigeria. Some signs of automation based on in-arrival time of responses from the same email address was also observed. The fact that these responses were in very short intervals proved that it is impossible for a human user to operate without automation. Many emails were found to have the exact same contents. We helped the researchers classify this into specific groups. The top 10 groups classified by phone, email, and IP subnet had 56% of scam attempts. The authors also found that price does not seem to be a factor. There was no real correlation between the scam trial and the product price. Here we see some of the patterns that the researchers were able to find within this study. On the left, we have a couple of the belligerent or threats that they received. Some included curse words. Some included threats of being reported to the FBI, which seemed ludicrous for a scammer to do. But again, they're just trying to imply fear into the victim. On the right, we have a couple emails showing curse words. Again, just trying to intimidate the users. And lastly, on the bottom right, we have some samples that show some animation was used, just basically broken scripts showing up on the titles or the body of the emails. As you can see, there's some broken HTML in there. In conclusion, the authors set out to provide additional information or understand a little bit more how this underground economy works, the economy of Nigerian scams. They were able to come up with some thoughtful information. First and foremost, scammers work regular work hours, although being Nigerian work hours, but they seem to work a regular schedule. They utilize some level of automation. Given the fact that this study was done in the year 2013, without a doubt, we can assume that the techniques used by scammers, and techniques being the automation techniques, have come a long way and are probably far more advanced than they were at the time of this research. Majority of the scammers are in Nigeria. Again, we cannot prove with 100% accuracy given the fact that they could have been using proxies, but the likelihood is that a lot of them are indeed based in Nigeria. The top 10 groups account for almost half of the scam attempts. This means that they were large not corporations, but large groups employing people to run these scams. Also, we concluded that there was a large number of ephemeral email addresses on the first messages, but immediately the reply to was set to a smaller set of addresses that were often reused and longer lived. This kind of proves that the initial response was likely automated, and then after the victim will respond to that initial message, it will probably fall into the hands of a human that will either utilize automated systems or likely use manual systems to interact with the victim in an attempt of scamming them. That is everything I have in summarizing this paper. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope you enjoy it.